Jinwoo had attempted to slip out of the apartment quietly, but his mother, Kyunghee, called out to him before he could leave. He paused, sitting back down for a moment. Concerned, she asked if there was anything she should worry about. Jinwoo quickly reassured her, explaining that he just had an appointment, promising he'd be back soon. With that, he left the apartment. Stepping outside, Jinwoo summoned the black key. The time had finally come. A notification appeared, showing the location where the key could be used. To his surprise, it was near his sister Gina's school. At the school gate, a couple of Hunter Association employees were discussing the situation. They were relieved that the school was closed, commenting that they wouldn't be able to handle the students if they were present. They also noted that a gate had appeared at the same spot once again. Cloaked in stealth, Jinwoo approached unnoticed. When one of the employees stepped forward to stop him, Jinwoo lowered his hood, revealing himself with a calm but commanding presence. The female employee recognized him from a previous encounter at a B-rank gate and was surprised to see him. Jinwoo asked how long the gate had been open, and she informed him that it had been 3 days. Jinwoo quickly realized the system had revealed the gate's location, but not the exact timing of its appearance. With 3 days having already passed, Jinwoo immediately sensed danger. Although the gate was classified as C rank, something felt off. He asked if any hunters had entered the gate, and the employee confirmed that an assault squad had gone in 2 hours ago. Jinwoo, without hesitation, instructed her to call them back, warning that the entire squad was in danger and would not survive if they stayed inside. The employee, confused and alarmed by Jinwoo's urgency, pointed out that the gate was only C rank. But Jinwoo, focused on rescuing the hunters, walked straight toward the gate, insisting there was no time to explain. Determined, he told her he'd bring the squad back himself, leaving her bewildered as he disappeared into the gate. Inside the dungeon, the floor was littered with the carcasses of magic beasts, a grim testament to the strike squad's battles. They now stood before the boss room, but something was wrong. No matter what they tried, the door wouldn't budge, even their magic proving useless. Frustration grew as they debated their next move, unwilling to turn back after coming so far. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, Jinwoo. His unexpected arrival startled the group, who initially didn't recognize him. Jinwoo calmly introduced himself as the survivor of the infamous double dungeon. One of the hunters, recognizing his name, whispered in awe, "Sung Jinwoo, the S-rank hunter." The group's surprise quickly turned to alarm as Jinwoo warned them of the danger they were in, urging them to leave immediately. Despite the C-rank classification, he sensed something far more perilous lurking ahead. Ignoring their disbelief, Jinwoo stepped forward to inspect the door. A notification appeared. Only he could see it. It revealed that the gate to the Kartanen temple was locked and required the black key to open. Jinwoo quickly understood that this dungeon was different from his past experiences, requiring him to use the key. As soon as he inserted it, the door creaked open, revealing the path forward. The strike squad was stunned. After all their efforts to open the door, Jinwoo had done it with ease. Still, some members of the squad, especially from the Dragon Guild, were defiant. They reminded Jinwoo that they had purchased the raid permit for this dungeon, and even though he was an S-rank, he had no right to tell them what to do. Jinwoo, understanding their position, told them he wouldn't stop them from entering, but warned them of the dangers. One hunter, eager to prove his bravery, stepped forward and entered the room. As soon as the man crossed the threshold, a notification popped up, only visible to Jinwoo. It warned that the person without the key had been denied access. Instantly, a massive sword swung down from the ceiling, aimed directly at the hunter's head. But before it could strike, Jinwoo swiftly pulled him back, saving his life just in time. The sword crashed into the ground, shattering the stone tiles beneath it. Terrified, the squad members screamed as monstrous doorkeepers, guardians of the temple, attacked. Jinwoo wasted no time, throwing the frightened hunter out of the room. He turned to the rest of the squad and warned them again. These monsters were far more dangerous than they realized. He urged them to report to the Hunter Association that this was a double dungeon and to leave immediately. Once the squad stood in silence, Jinwoo stepped through the door, alone. A notification confirmed that the one who held the key had entered. The door slammed shut behind him with a heavy thud. The room Jinwoo entered was massive, its sheer size overwhelming. Towering statues lined the walls, each one intricately carved and standing as silent sentinels. At the far end, a colossal statue loomed ominously over the space. Everything looked just as Jinwoo remembered from his previous encounter, but something felt different this time. Jinwoo himself had changed. With his newfound strength, he could now see the statues for what they truly were. They weren't magic beasts as they had seemed before. They were mere puppets, controlled by something far more sinister. As Jinwoo's sharp senses scanned the room, he detected a hidden presence, an aura so dark and malevolent that it would have been impossible to notice before. Jinwoo approached one particular statue, the only one holding a stone tablet. Unlike the others, this one exuded an eerie aura. As he drew closer, he spoke. "It was you." The statue remained still, offering no response. Frustration surged within Jinwoo, and just as he was about to question further, something chilling happened. The statue's lips curled into a smile, its red eyes flickering to life. "At last, you have arrived?" A twisted voice echoed through the hall, laced with satisfaction. The time for answers had finally come. Meanwhile, across Japan, the nation was glued to their screens, eagerly watching Yuri Orlov's interview. He had promised to protect Japan from the looming threat of an S-rank gate. In Korea, Hunters Association President Go Gun-hee also watched the broadcast, his face etched with concern. He wasn't fully convinced that Yuri could seal such a powerful gate, but one thing was certain. If Yuri failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Chairman Go Gun-hee turned to his assistant, Woo Jin-chul, and asked for an update on Hunter Sung Jinwoo's recent activities. Jin-chul handed over a list, explaining that Jinwoo had been busy raiding numerous gates around Seoul. The Ajin Guild, Jinwoo's personal guild, had requested permits for all the gates listed. Gun-hee raised an eyebrow, intrigued. It was unusual for a small, newly formed guild to target so many gates that were typically controlled by major guilds like White Tiger, Hunters, and Fiend. Jin-chul noted that some friction might arise because of this, but Gun-hee simply chuckled at the thought. The idea that a single man's guild could rival a major guild was both amusing and fascinating. Jin-chul added that the Ajin Guild had also requested to handle nearby gates for the next week, though the reasons were unclear. Without seeing any issue, Gun-hee agreed without hesitation. Just as they finished discussing, Jin-chul's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He asked for permission to step aside, which Gun-hee granted as he himself had an appointment to attend. Jin-chul answered the call, and his expression quickly turned serious. The caller reported alarming news. A new gate had appeared at the same school where a group of orcs had attacked before. Even more shocking was the discovery of a double dungeon inside the gate. The final detail left Jin-chul stunned. Hunter Sung Jinwoo had entered the double dungeon. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, Jinwoo stood before a colossal statue with 6 wings, resembling an angel holding a stone slate. The wind howled through the vast hall, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Without warning, the slate began to crack, and in a sudden, violent motion, the statue smashed it into pieces. Debris flew around Jinwoo as the remnants crumbled at his feet. The statue spoke, acknowledging that Jinwoo had finally arrived. It seemed to mock the importance of the slate's commandments, hinting that they might not have mattered at all. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed, and he asked if it was truly acceptable to destroy something so significant. But the statue corrected him, explaining that while the commandments once held meaning, they were now obsolete. Jinwoo, growing impatient, demanded to know if the statue was the one who had summoned him to this place. With a sinister grin, the statue confirmed that it had indeed called him here. However, when Jinwoo asked if the statue was a monster, It dismissed the question, telling him he was focusing on the wrong thing. The statue clapped its hands, drawing Jinwoo's attention elsewhere. It suggested that instead of questioning the statue's identity, Jinwoo should have been asking about his own. This revelation marked the beginning of Jinwoo's final test. As the sound of stone cracking filled the room, the other statues began to turn their heads toward him. Slowly, they stepped off their pedestals, weapons raised, ready to attack. Jinwoo, always prepared, summoned his shadow soldiers to fight. But before they could act, the statue snapped its fingers, stopping them in their tracks. This test was meant for Jinwoo alone. No help, no shortcuts. A notification appeared, informing him that all his job-exclusive skills, potions, and rewards from leveling up or completing quests were now restricted. Everything that had once given him an edge in combat was disabled. The statue emphasized that it was only interested in evaluating Jinwoo's personal strength, not the abilities of his shadow soldiers. Jinwoo frowned at each restriction, but there was no time to dwell on it. The advantages he had relied on were now gone, leaving him with only his own strength. He couldn't leave until the test was complete, so he prepared to face the challenge ahead with nothing but his raw power. The stone figures began to advance, their heavy footsteps echoing ominously through the chamber. Jinwoo watched them carefully, remembering how powerful these puppets were. Once, they had nearly killed him, but now the tables had turned. One of the figures swung a massive sword at him, cutting through the air with deadly speed. Jinwoo, realizing his inventory was still accessible, decided he would defeat them using only his strength. As the sword came crashing down, he caught it with his bare hands. In one swift motion, he snapped the blade in half. Without hesitation, he grabbed the broken piece of the sword and hurled it with incredible force. The shard flew through the air and pierced the stone figure's temple with deadly precision. Not pausing for a second, Jinwoo darted forward. The damaged figure struggled to pull the shard from its head, but Jinwoo was faster. He leaped into the air, driving the shard even deeper into the figure's skull with a precise kick, causing the entire statue to shatter. Another stone figure approached, swinging a massive axe. Jinwoo tightened his grip on his daggers, ready for the strike. With a swift motion, he blocked the incoming attack. The sound of metal clashing echoed through the room. In an instant, Jinwoo countered, slashing the axe in two. As he leaped into the air, the stone figure tracked his movement, but it was too slow. Jinwoo came down with a crushing blow, dragging his daggers across its head and shattering its skull with precise force. Next, a figure armed with a bow took aim and fired an arrow at Jinwoo with incredible speed. Jinwoo dodged effortlessly, the arrow whizzing past him. The figure quickly fired another, but Jinwoo sliced it in two mid-air with his daggers. Without missing a beat, Jinwoo jumped toward the broken arrow halves, his movements a blur. He kicked one of the pieces with brutal force, turning it into a missile. The shard struck the stone archer's head, shattering it into fragments. As the figure collapsed, Jinwoo's eyes blazed with determination. One by one, he cut down the advancing statues, parrying and blocking each attack with precision. He moved like a whirlwind, dismantling the stone figures with ease. His heart pounded with anticipation, knowing the true challenge was yet to come. This was the moment Jinwoo had been waiting for, the challenge that made him feel truly alive. His movements were fluid and precise, like a well-rehearsed dance of destruction. Wielding the demon monarch's daggers, he sliced through the stone figures as if they were fragile clay, each strike shattering them with ease. His body, mind, and weapons had become one, transforming him into an unstoppable force. As the statues crumbled one by one, the chamber echoed with the sound of destruction. From across the room, the angelic statue with 6 wings trembled in delight, watching Jinwoo's deadly grace with sinister satisfaction. It marveled at how far this mere human had come, the power he now wielded far surpassing what the statue had anticipated. Jinwoo's daggers moved with blinding speed, effortlessly blocking and countering the relentless strikes from the stone figures. The once elusive and seemingly teleporting movements of his enemies were now crystal clear to him. He could follow every step, every swing, with flawless precision. His blades clashed against stone, sending shards flying, but Jinwoo remained unfazed. He had grown stronger, and it showed in every cut and every deflected blow. The angelic statue, still observing from afar, smiled wider. It was clear to the statue that Jinwoo had surpassed its expectations, but the test wasn't over yet. The sinister grin on the statue's face widened as a deep rumble filled the room, drawing Jinwoo's attention. Jinwoo's gaze shifted to the massive colossus seated on the throne at the far end of the hall. The giant figure, dormant until now, slowly opened its glowing red eyes. The ground trembled beneath its weight as the colossus gripped the armrests of its throne and began to rise. The grinding sound of stone against stone filled the chamber as the giant stood to its full, towering height. The sheer size of the colossus was enough to send a wave of unease through the room. Each of its steps shook the ground, sending tremors through the lair as it moved forward with purpose. Its overwhelming presence filled the air with tension, and every fiber of Jinwoo's being braced for the battle to come. The angelic statue, watching with anticipation, called out in a voice filled with excitement, "Now the time has come to worship the god." Without hesitation, Jinwoo surged forward once more, decapitating yet another stone figure with a swift slice from his daggers. Despite the seemingly endless number of stone soldiers that rushed at him, Jinwoo cut them down with calculated precision. But his instincts told him that something far more dangerous was approaching. He glanced up, locking eyes with the massive colossus. Its once dormant eyes now blazed with an intense red light, and in an instant, Jinwoo realized the real threat had arrived. The battle had just begun. Jinwoo's heart raced as the colossus prepared its next deadly blast. Without hesitation, he dropped the dagger from his left hand and extended his arm toward the advancing stone figures. With a surge of energy, he activated Commander's touch. Power flooded through him as 5 of the stone soldiers were immediately seized by his will, crushed together mid-air like puppets on strings. Just as they collided, the colossus unleashed its devastating attack. A brilliant red laser beam shot from the colossus's eyes with a searing intensity. The deafening sizzle of the blast filled the air as it collided with Jinwoo's improvised shield. The bound statues. The force of the beam shook the entire temple. Jinwoo felt the overwhelming power of the laser, watching as the statues were vaporized in mere seconds, melting into molten rubble. But it had served its purpose, buying him the few precious moments he needed to leap backward, avoiding the full force of the attack. As the heat and dust began to settle, Jinwoo's gaze locked on a new notification flashing before him. Commander's touch has been upgraded to Dominator's authority. A smirk crossed his face. His skill had just reached its final form. But despite the small victory, Jinwoo knew the danger he was facing. Even at his current level, a direct hit from that laser would mean instant death. He needed to take the Colossus down, and fast if he had any chance of surviving this test. The eerie red light in the Colossus's eyes intensified, signaling another attack was imminent. Jinwoo tapped his foot lightly on the ground, and with a sharp crack, he launched himself forward. His body became a blur of motion, darting toward the massive figure. The Colossus, reacting slowly, raised its gigantic foot and slammed it down, trying to crush him. But Jinwoo's speed was far beyond what the giant could track. He weaved effortlessly out of the foot's path, missing him entirely. Jinwoo closed the distance to the Colossus's feet, crouching low as he prepared his next move. He knew he only had one shot at this. The Colossus's glowing red eyes tracked him, preparing to fire another lethal beam. Jinwoo focused all his energy into his legs and propelled himself upward with all his might, rocketing into the air. As he ascended, he could feel the intense heat radiating from the Colossus's deadly gaze, tracking him once again. But Jinwoo had a plan. As he soared higher, he extended his hand and activated Dominator's authority, but instead of pulling the giant statue toward him, he reversed the force, dragging himself closer to the Colossus. Just as another red beam shot from the Colossus's eyes, Jinwoo narrowly avoided it, the heat crackling through the air where he had just been. The gravitational pull of Dominator's authority yanked him straight toward the Colossus's shoulder. The upgrade had made a crucial difference. Jinwoo now had the power to manipulate even this massive foe. As he flew closer, he gripped his remaining dagger tightly, his mind focused on the task ahead. With the skill mutilation activated, Jinwoo surged forward with lightning speed. His body was a blur as he raced across the Colossus's enormous shoulder. The air shimmered with the speed of his movements, and bright silver lines illuminated the giant's stony face as he struck with the demon monarch's dagger. His blade slashed through the air, leaving trails of destruction in its wake. The Colossus, now marked with glowing lines from Jinwoo's rapid strikes, groaned in response to the overwhelming assault. Jinwoo's focus remained sharp, knowing that every second counted in this deadly game. Despite Jinwoo's speed and precision, his strikes barely left a mark. Each blow he dealt to the Colossus only resulted in shallow scratches. His dagger, known for cutting through the toughest enemies, was struggling to make a dent against the massive stone figure. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. The damage was insignificant, mere surface wounds against a foe built like a fortress. Realizing the futility of his current approach, Jinwoo decided to switch tactics. If his blade couldn't penetrate the Colossus's dense stone, then he would rely on sheer power instead. His gaze locked onto a small crevice on the statue's face, a potential weak spot. Without a second thought, he leapt onto the giant, gripping its face as if scaling a mountainside. His hands latched firmly onto the cracks, his focus intensifying. Drawing in a deep breath, Jinwoo funneled every ounce of mana into his arms. His muscles bulged with the raw power coursing through them, veins throbbing as he prepared for his next move. With all the force he could muster, he unleashed a devastating punch. The impact echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap, reverberating off the stone walls. The Colossus faltered slightly, its once serene face registering a hint of shock. The angelic figure overseeing the test seemed momentarily caught off guard, never anticipating such a direct assault on its creation. Jinwoo didn't stop there. He followed up with a flurry of powerful punches, each one harder and more forceful than the last. The relentless rhythm of his blows filled the lair with loud, bone-shaking sounds. His fists crashed against the Colossus's face, sending cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. Fueled by fury and the need to prove his strength, Jinwoo showed no mercy, each strike widening the fissures in the stone. Finally, with one last earth-shattering punch, the Colossus couldn't hold itself together any longer. The giant statue crumbled, collapsing to the ground with a deafening crash. The entire lair shook as the massive figure fell, sending a thick cloud of dust billowing into the air. As the dust settled, Jinwoo stood tall, his form emerging unscathed amidst the chaos. But the battle wasn't over. The remaining stone statues, seizing the moment, launched themselves at him from all sides. Their movements were swift, their stone arms reaching out to strike. Jinwoo, however, was quicker. Before they could close in, he raised his hand and activated Dominator's authority. Instantly, the statues froze in midair, helpless against his power. With a sharp, commanding gesture, Jinwoo sent their heads slamming into the ground. The force was enough to shatter them completely, their bodies crumbling into lifeless rubble. The ground rumbled briefly, before falling still, the chamber falling silent once more. Jinwoo clenched his fist, feeling the surge of strength from the intense battle. He could feel it. He had grown stronger, more powerful than ever before. His victory over the Colossus had brought him closer to his ultimate goal. But then, a slow, deliberate sound cut through the silence. Clapping. Jinwoo's sharp gaze turned toward the source of the noise, his eyes narrowing as he saw the angelic statue standing there. Its expression was unreadable, but Jinwoo's patience had reached its limit. Without hesitation, he demanded answers. Yet instead of responding with clarity, the angelic figure let out a cold, hollow laugh that echoed eerily throughout the chamber, as if it came from all directions at once. Before Jinwoo could react, a sudden notification flashed before his eyes, drawing his attention. The urgent quest message carried an ominous weight, sending a chill down his spine. It was clear something far more dangerous was on the horizon. The angel's voice, disembodied and unsettling, echoed once more through the lair, declaring itself as Jinwoo's final test. The last challenge stood between him and the truth he sought, the final obstacle before the answers he had been chasing. The room grew still, the weight of the impending battle pressing down on him. Time became Jinwoo's greatest adversary, with only 10 minutes separating him from death. His heart would stop if he failed to overcome the challenge before him. As each second slipped away, frustration gnawed at him. Yet, even with the urgency, he demanded to know the true identity of the angelic statue. A notification flashed, reminding him that his question had already been dismissed. But as if offering a final cryptic answer, the statue revealed its truth. It was the architect of the system itself. Meanwhile, outside, the surveillance team arrived at the scene. The tension in the air was palpable as a female employee took charge, directing the team into their positions. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing moment. Jinwoo, the leader, had managed to gather 7 elite hunters from the association, the best he could summon on such short notice. However, deep down, Jinwoo harbored doubts. He knew that even these top hunters wouldn't be enough to truly aid Sung Jinwoo. His actions were more of a contingency plan, a preparation for the worst possible outcome. His gaze remained locked on the gate before them. Something about the energy emanating from it was deeply unsettling. The amount of magical power flowing out was immense, distorting the space around the gate. A wave of nausea hit Jinwoo as his instincts screamed at him, warning of the impending danger. He took a cautious step back, the oppressive mana pressing down on him like the weight of a gathering storm. The dread he felt was unlike anything he'd ever experienced before. Muttering to himself, Jinwoo tried to make sense of the situation, the bone-chilling aura seeping from the gate confirming his worst fears. He turned to his team, asking if anyone else could sense the same overwhelming presence. He needed to be sure it wasn't just his nerves playing tricks on him. One of his subordinates confirmed the suffocating pressure, mentioning that the Hunters Guild was on standby, prepared for a potential raid if needed. When Jinwoo inquired about the availability of the guild's strongest hunters, the subordinate informed him that both Choi Jong-in and Cha Hai-in, the renowned S-rank hunters, had agreed to assist if the situation escalated. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Jinwoo wasted no time. He ordered an emergency request for cooperation to be sent to the Hunters Guild. It was clear they would need all the strength they could muster to face whatever lay beyond the gate. Inside the temple, the final test had begun. Jinwoo now stood face to face with the architect, the mastermind behind every trial he had endured. The air crackled with tension, heavy with the anticipation of the looming battle. Without warning, the ground trembled, and the architect charged forward with terrifying speed. Jinwoo barely had time to react. He attempted to evade, but the architect's movements were too precise, too fast, intercepting him before he could escape. In an instant, a barrage of punches came flying at Jinwoo, their speed blinding, too close to dodge. Acting on pure instinct, Jinwoo raised his arms to block. The defense dulled the impact, but the force was still overwhelming. The architect's punch landed with a thunderous bam, sending Jinwoo flying across the chamber. He crashed into the ground with bone-shaking force, rubble scattering in all directions. The chamber itself trembled from the blow, the ground beneath him splintering with cracks. Pain surged through Jinwoo's body from the brutal impact, his bones aching from the force of the attack. But the architect wasn't finished. Before Jinwoo could regain his footing, the towering figure loomed over him, ready to strike once again. A split second before the next blow landed, Jinwoo instinctively tilted his head, narrowly dodging the crushing fist. The architect's punch smashed into the wall behind him, leaving a deep crater where Jinwoo had been only moments earlier. Fists flew at him with terrifying speed, each strike aimed to obliterate him, but Jinwoo moved with blinding agility, evading every attack with flawless precision. His body blurred as he ducked, weaved, and sidestepped the architect's relentless barrage. Despite the architect's overwhelming assault, Jinwoo stayed focused. The floor beneath him cracked under the force of each missed blow, and the sound of impact reverberated throughout the chamber. The architect grinned as it continued to unleash a flurry of punches, each one powerful enough to crush any high-ranking hunter in an instant. Yet Jinwoo, undeterred, parried each hit with remarkable speed. His two hands blocked and deflected all 8 of the architect's fists, a feat that seemed impossible. The architect, visibly frustrated, could only see the afterimages of Jinwoo's movements, its strikes failing to connect. Suddenly, one of the architect's powerful fists landed a direct hit on Jinwoo's jaw, sending a brutal shockwave through his body. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead as pain surged, but Jinwoo remained resolute, his spirit unshaken. He had reached his limit, and it was time to strike back. Crouching low, he gathered his strength and, with a fierce determination, launched a devastating punch. The impact was explosive. The architect was sent flying across the lair, crashing and tumbling from the sheer force of Jinwoo's blow. For a moment, there was silence. But then, the architect stood up, its feet firmly planted on the ground once more, a wide grin spreading across its face. For the first time in its existence, the architect seemed genuinely entertained. It had never imagined a human could be such a formidable opponent, but now, standing before Jinwoo, it recognized the challenge it had created. Blood trickled into Jinwoo's eye, blurring his vision, but his mind remained sharp. He could sense the architect's arrogance, the assumption that Jinwoo, at level 101, was no match for it. But Jinwoo knew he had the strength to win. Gritting his teeth, he locked eyes with the architect, determined to uncover the truth. He wanted answers. Why had the architect created the system? And why had Jinwoo been chosen as its player? Amused by Jinwoo's sudden curiosity, the architect taunted him, asking why he wanted to know now. With a smirk, it added, "I see. You think you won't get the answers if you kill me." To the architect, the idea of defeat seemed laughable, a mere fantasy. Realizing that staying in close quarters was dangerous, Jinwoo swiftly increased the distance between them. He activated Dominator's authority, preparing for a long-range battle. But the architect remained unfazed. It extended its arms, revealing that it too could use Dominator's authority. Their forces clashed in midair, creating a colossal gravitational pull that scorched the ground and shattered the earth beneath them. Jinwoo quickly realized a harsh truth. If the architect could mirror his abilities, long-range attacks would be useless. This would be a battle of strength, strategy, and survival. The architect stood tall, all 8 of his arms outstretched, weapons hovering in the air around him, vibrating with ominous energy. With Dominator's authority, he seized control of the scattered weapons on the ground, each one flying toward him as if pulled by an unseen force. In a matter of moments, the architect held a different weapon in each of his 8 hands: sword, spear, axe, hammer, and more, each one glowing with a dangerous aura. Jinwoo, tightening his grip on his twin daggers, demanded more answers. How had the architect built such an unstoppable system? How had he gained such immense abilities? The architect, now armed to the teeth, finally gave an answer, though it wasn't what Jinwoo had expected. The architect had not chosen Jinwoo at all. In fact, he had been against it. He was merely the creator and overseer of the player breeding system. A perfect design, he called it. Everything, from the start, had been meticulously planned, every step predetermined. But Jinwoo couldn't waste time pondering these revelations. Less than 7 minutes remained. Time was slipping through his fingers, and he knew he had to face the architect head-on. The architect seemed to sense the urgency as well. Without warning, he launched himself into the air, landing in front of Jinwoo with a force so powerful it cracked the stone beneath their feet, sending chunks of rubble flying in all directions. Armed with his 8 weapons, the architect's attacks rained down on Jinwoo like a storm, swift, relentless, and precise. Each weapon, guided by Dominator's authority, struck with deadly intent. Swords, spears, and axes sliced through the air, while hammers and blades crashed into the ground around Jinwoo, filling the lair with deafening sounds of impact. Despite the overwhelming barrage, Jinwoo stood firm. His breathing remained steady, his focus unwavering as he locked eyes with the architect. Amid the chaos, Jinwoo felt something within him shift. His senses sharpened beyond their limits. Time seemed to slow down. Even with his vision partially obscured by the blood trickling into one of his eyes, Jinwoo could see the architect's attacks coming from every angle. His perception had evolved, pushing him into a state of hyper-awareness. The weapons flew at him with terrifying speed, but Jinwoo moved with precision, dodging the architect's sword by mere inches. He could see the attacks before they landed, weaving through the storm of strikes with uncanny agility. Each time the architect attacked, Jinwoo countered, his speed increasing with every passing second. The architect's grin faltered. His full strength was on display, yet Jinwoo was not only deflecting his attacks, but was responding with growing speed and precision. Jinwoo's daggers danced through the air, and with a sharp, decisive strike, he severed one of the architect's arms. The detached limb tumbled through the air, clattering to the ground in a cloud of dust. The architect stumbled back, eyes wide in shock. Pain coursed through him, and disbelief filled his expression. How could a mere human have caused him such damage? He glared at Jinwoo, his gaze narrowing as he realized that there was something else within the hunter. Something far greater. A force that allowed him to stand on equal footing in this battle. But Jinwoo remained calm, his breathing even, his eyes sharp and focused. He was ready for the next move, determined to end this once and for all. The architect's fury erupted in a violent roar, his disbelief at being defied by a mere human overwhelming him. In a desperate attempt to regain control, he summoned the statues, commanding them to rise and attack. Even those with shattered heads and broken limbs obeyed, slowly pulling themselves from the ground. The earth trembled beneath their feet as they stood, ready to fight. Jinwoo, though surrounded, remained calm, quickly assessing their positions. Time was slipping away, just over 3 minutes left, and he knew he had no choice but to finish this. Without hesitation, Jinwoo stretched out his hand, activating his dominator's authority. A powerful blast erupted from him, sending a wave of statues flying backward as if struck by an explosion. With incredible speed, Jinwoo dashed forward, his daggers gripped tightly, weaving through the battlefield. But as he closed in on the architect, a massive statue's fist descended toward him. In a flash, Jinwoo leaped to the side, narrowly avoiding the crushing blow. The giant's fist crashed down, obliterating dozens of nearby statues in its wake. Undeterred, Jinwoo continued his charge, circling the battlefield to avoid further attacks while closing the distance to the architect. The architect's hands moved like lightning, each strike a deadly blur. But Jinwoo, at the center of it all, remained calm and focused. His attacks were relentless, and with each strike, the architect's defenses began to falter. Jinwoo's dagger cut through the air, severing one of the architect's arms, causing the figure to stumble. The architect retaliated, raising his sword high, but Jinwoo met the strike with explosive force, his blade clashing against the architect's. Just as he was about to land the decisive blow, an unexpected impact struck him from behind. A shield-wielding statue slammed into his back, throwing him off balance. Jinwoo winced, momentarily stunned, but his anger flared as he spotted the statue responsible, the same one that had attacked him earlier. Fueled by rage, Jinwoo leaped into the air, his elbow crackling with mana. He descended with brutal precision, shattering the statue's head with a crushing blow, turning it to dust in an instant. Without missing a beat, Jinwoo turned back toward the architect, who watched in disbelief. As Jinwoo closed in, the architect's eyes widened in shock at the speed and ferocity of his assault. In one fluid motion, Jinwoo slashed off 2 more of the architect's arms, the severed limbs falling to the ground with a resounding thud. With a final powerful strike, Jinwoo brought the architect to the ground, the impact shaking the entire room. Dust and debris filled the air as the architect crashed to the floor. Jinwoo slowly approached the fallen figure, his dagger raised. He pressed the blade to the architect's neck, signaling the end of the battle. Defeated, the architect acknowledged his loss, declaring the test complete. As the timer, which had been counting down, abruptly stopped, the tension in the room dissipated. The architect pointed a finger at Jinwoo, his voice solemn as he revealed that the answers Jinwoo sought were within him. Confused, Jinwoo wondered how that could be possible. Just then, a notification appeared before his eyes, asking if he wished to accept the retrieval of data. The architect locked eyes with him, emphasizing that the choice was Jinwoo's alone. Jinwoo pondered the decision, the weight of it heavy on his mind. Despite the myriad of questions swirling in his thoughts, he made up his mind. With unwavering resolve, he answered yes. In an instant, darkness enveloped him, and he felt his body become weightless, drifting through an endless void. Then, the system's voice echoed around him. "You have successfully retrieved the data." Suddenly, Jinwoo found himself hurtling through a dark tunnel, the momentum carrying him at breakneck speed. The tunnel stretched on, and with a final jolt, he was thrust into a blinding light. His eyes took a moment to adjust, and when they did, he gasped at the sight below him. An endless army of magical beasts stretched across the land, their numbers staggering. From high orcs to ice elves, goblins to giants, the creatures lined up in rows, their power evident in every stance. Jinwoo's heart raced as he processed the magnitude of what he was seeing. What were these creatures waiting for? Following their collective gaze, he saw it. Suspended in the sky was a colossal black shape. It looked like a dark lake, but it wasn't water. It was a gate, a massive one, blocking out the strangely purple sky above. Jinwoo's disbelief deepened. This was no longer Earth. The arid, brownish-red wasteland, the bizarre rock formations, and the sky's unnatural hue confirmed it. He wasn't on his home planet. The magical beasts below stirred, their focus unwavering as they watched the gate. If these creatures broke through and invaded Earth, humanity wouldn't stand a chance. Jinwoo couldn't shake the sense of dread that settled in his chest as he witnessed the sheer scale of the impending disaster. Then, the impossible happened. The gate, once intact, began to crack. The sound of shattering stone echoed across the battlefield as the gate split open. From the broken gate, silver-armored winged soldiers poured out, filling the sky. Their armor gleamed as they descended like a swarm of enraged bees. The magical beasts below roared, rallying to meet this new threat. A horn blared across the battlefield, signaling the start of the clash. The soldiers in silver armor descended, and the battle began. The air was filled with the sound of clashing weapons, shattered armor, and blood-curdling screams. But it became clear quickly that the soldiers had the upper hand. Their precision and overwhelming strength were unmatched. The magical beasts, fearsome in their own right, were no match for the soldiers' might. The tide of battle shifted rapidly in favor of the armored warriors, and Jinwoo realized that the annihilation of the magical beasts was imminent. However, just as victory seemed assured, something unexpected occurred. One by one, the silver soldiers froze, their bodies immobilized. A massive shadow began to spread across the battlefield, creeping over the blood-soaked ground like a tidal wave. Chilling screams echoed from nowhere, filling the air with an eerie sense of dread. Jinwoo's mind raced as he recognized the sensation. This was the ability to control shadows, a power he knew all too well. A towering knight clad entirely in black armor appeared on the battlefield, a dark aura radiating from both him and the steed he rode. The knight's presence was suffocating, his power undeniable. Jinwoo's heart skipped a beat as realization hit him. There was only one being capable of wielding such dark power, the Shadow Monarch. With an air of absolute command, the Shadow Monarch's gaze swept across the silver soldiers in the sky. His voice, deep and resonant, pierced the eerie stillness of the battlefield. Arise. That single word rippled through the air with an almost unnatural force, and immediately the ground trembled. Shadows began to shift, moving like waves across the blood-soaked earth. The once crimson battlefield was overtaken by an all-encompassing sea of black. The fallen soldiers, now reanimated as shadowy warriors, opened their glowing eyes, their forms pulsating with dark energy. Their roars and shrieks filled the air, an unsettling blend of battle cries and wailing screams that echoed throughout the desolate landscape. The monsters that had once perished now rose again, their blood thickened with darkness, giving them a newfound strength. Death had not claimed them. Instead, it had transformed them into something more terrifying, more powerful. Jinwoo, observing the spectacle before him, was awestruck. The Shadow Monarch had the ability to summon an endless legion of shadow soldiers, an unimaginable power far beyond anything Jinwoo could currently wield. It was a display of strength that left him in awe, a testament to the Shadow Monarch's terrifying might. The resurrected beasts charged forward, now possessed with dark energy, their once lifeless bodies moving with deadly intent. The battlefield, once dominated by the Silver Soldiers, was now a chaotic and violent war between two opposing armies. Black clashed against Silver in a violent storm of explosions and destruction, the earth itself trembling beneath the force of their conflict. What had once been a one-sided slaughter was now a brutal, evenly matched war, all because of the arrival of a singular, overwhelming force, the Shadow Monarch. With his massive black steed, the Shadow Monarch charged into the fray, his sword swinging with unstoppable force. Every strike felled thousands of enemies, and with each fallen soldier, a new Shadow Warrior was born, rising to fight in his growing army. With a simple wave of his hand, the Silver Soldier's wings were ripped away, sending them plummeting from the skies to meet their end. Jinwoo recognized the skill instantly. The monarch was wielding Dominator's authority, the same power he himself had tapped into. Wherever the Shadow Monarch moved, devastation followed. The battlefield, once a place of intense struggle, was now a wasteland in his wake. Victory seemed all but assured for the monarch and his ever-growing army of reanimated monsters. But just as the tide of battle appeared to settle in his favor, something shifted. Jinwoo's eyes widened in shock as an ominous wind began to sweep across the battlefield. Suddenly, two massive gates, as colossal as the ones floating above, materialized behind the Shadow Monarch. From within these gates, two distinct groups of magic beasts emerged, adding a new level of intensity to the battle. The first group was composed of knights and soldiers, their banners fluttering as they charged into the fray. Jinwoo's eyes sharpened as he recognized the crests on their standards. Ricardo, Pathos, Loken, Ingras, and even the Radiru clan, to which Esil belonged. These were the noble clans from the Demon's Castle, renowned for their strength and fearsome power. The second group, however, was even more terrifying. A colossal wolf, towering like a mountain, stepped out of the gates, its massive paws sending tremors through the earth with every stomp. Its growl resonated across the battlefield, a deep guttural sound that sent a chill through the air. Behind the wolf, a horde of savage beasts followed, their howls merging into a symphony of monstrous roars. With the animal-type beasts and the demon clan now surrounding the Shadow Monarch and his army, the war reached a whole new level of devastation. The tide of battle shifted once again. The animal-type beasts and demons launched a brutal, coordinated assault on the Shadow Soldiers. The battlefield became a chaotic storm of attacks, with both sides giving no quarter. Yet, no matter how many Shadow Soldiers were obliterated, they regenerated almost instantly, rising once again to fight. Jinwoo, watching the incredible display, couldn't help but marvel at the power of the Shadow Monarch. If these were his own soldiers, Jinwoo would have run out of mana long ago, but the Shadow Monarch seemed to possess an endless well of energy that fueled his unstoppable army. Despite the ferocious onslaught from the demon clans and the animal-type beasts, the Shadow Soldiers kept regenerating, their numbers seemingly infinite. This raised troubling questions in Jinwoo's mind. The monsters didn't seem to be allies of the Shadow Monarch. The demon clans and the beasts were attacking the Shadow Soldiers just as fiercely as they were battling the Silver Soldiers. Was there an internal conflict between them, or had they never been on the same side to begin with? The battle raged on, the battlefield quickly becoming a sea of blood and fallen bodies. The violence seemed endless, consuming everything in its path. As the war drew toward its conclusion, only a handful of creatures remained on the blood-streaked terrain. The shadow monarch approached one demon, slumped against a rock, its face hidden behind a helmet. Despite the demon's weakened state, the monarch's gaze was unwavering. There was no mistaking the tension between them as they faced each other in silence. The shadow monarch's voice cut through the stillness, cold and commanding as he demanded answers about the demon's betrayal. The demon, however, laughed bitterly, speaking in a language that few would understand, but the shadow monarch clearly did. Without warning, the monarch reached out and gripped the demon's neck, lifting it effortlessly off the ground. The demon struggled, its armor groaning under the strength of the monarch's hold. Even as blood dripped from its mouth, the demon attempted to speak, despite the crushing pain. Then, something extraordinary happened. As Jinwoo watched, the demon's eyes met his own, eyes that filled him with recognition. His heart raced as he realized who the demon was. Those eyes were all too familiar. His pulse quickened as he finally understood. The demon was none other than Baran, the Demon King. Jinwoo's hands trembled as the shadow monarch released the lifeless body, which crumpled to the ground with a sickening thud. As the helmet clattered to the earth, Jinwoo's shock deepened. Baran's face, twisted with burning hatred, stared up at him. It was the same face he had seen in the demon's castle. But as the pieces fell into place, another revelation struck him. Baran, the Demon King, was now clad head to toe in black armor, his form completely enveloped by the same dark power that had consumed the battlefield. At some point, Jinwoo had unknowingly taken control of the Shadow Monarch's body. His heart pounded furiously, each beat echoing in his ears. Instinctively, he placed a hand on his chest, feeling its rapid rhythm. But then, something unusual caught his attention. His hand moved to the right side of his chest, where he felt another heartbeat. 2 hearts, both beating in perfect unison. He had become more aware of his heartbeat since the double dungeon incident, yet he had failed to notice this bizarre detail until now. As the realization settled in, Jinwoo's gaze dropped to the ground, his mind swirling with confusion. Before he could fully process it, shadows loomed from above. He lifted his head just in time to see 4 figures descending toward him. Angels, each possessing 6 wings, floated ominously in the air. Their presence radiated an overwhelming authority. Then, the memory ended. A soft chime echoed around him, and darkness swallowed his vision once more. As unconsciousness pulled him under, the familiar voice of the system rang out. Data retrieval is complete. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the gate, the elite squad from the Hunters Guild, led by Jongin and Jimchul, stood before a massive doorway resembling an ancient castle. The structure exuded an ominous presence, and a heavy tension filled the air. The overwhelming manner radiating from within unsettled Jongin. He exchanged a wary glance with Jimchul, silently questioning the situation. Yet Jimchul remained confident in his information. Sung Jinwoo was inside. Among the group, Cha Hai-in carefully observed their surroundings. The mana saturating the air felt foreign. It didn't belong to Jinwoo. A nagging suspicion took root in her mind. Was another force at play? The possibility of a double dungeon surfaced in her thoughts. If true, this was her opportunity to confirm the rumors. Her unspoken debt to Jinwoo pushed her forward. Jimchul's mind drifted to an earlier conversation with Jinwoo. Jinwoo had once insisted that he hadn't been the one to clear the double dungeon before. So why had he returned to this dangerous place? The question gnawed at Jimchul, fueling his suspicion that this was more than mere coincidence. Determined, the hunters pressed forward. As they stepped through the gate, they were met with a sight beyond comprehension. The vast chamber was in complete ruin. Debris littered the floor. Broken stone statues lay in shattered heaps, and massive chunks of rubble marked the aftermath of a ferocious battle. Jongin's eyes widened in disbelief, struggling to process the devastation before him. Other hunters gaped at the scene, their minds reeling. The legendary statues of God, long thought to be mere myths, had stood in this very place. A sudden, booming voice shattered the silence. The hunters snapped their attention toward its source. Towering above them, the architect stood, his gaze sweeping over the group with dark amusement. A twisted grin curled his lips as he spoke, his tone laced with malice. The hunters flinched. This creature could speak their language. Raising a single finger to his lips, the architect commanded silence. Then, in a voice that sent chills down their spines, he uttered a warning. They must not disturb the one who was resting. Jinwoo stood motionless, his form eerily still, as if lost in an eternal slumber. Jinwoo stood frozen, unaware of his surroundings. From a distance, Myung-chul recognized him instantly. Before he could utter a word, a sudden, brutal attack struck him and two other hunters. In a single swift motion, the architect's power tore through them, splitting two hunters in half. Myung-chul was gravely wounded, blood splattering across the room. Hae-in's eyes widened in panic as chaos erupted. The architect stepped forward, his voice cold and menacing, declaring that these powerful humans would serve as the perfect first offerings to the king. Myung-chul lay on the ground, blood pouring from his mouth. Yongin's desperate voice rang out as he ordered the others to heal him immediately. The healers scrambled, pouring their energy into saving him while the wounded were quickly moved to safety. Myung-chul's condition was critical, but the healers worked tirelessly, trying to stop the bleeding. Just then, the statues, once thought to be destroyed, rose again. Their cold, emotionless faces made them appear even more grotesque. The architect's voice echoed through the chamber, taunting the hunters. He promised that those who survived would witness the ultimate victory, the birth of the king. His words sent a shiver through the group, but there was no time to process the meaning. As the architect finished speaking, a red laser shot across the room. Yangon screamed a warning just in time. The hunters ducked, narrowly avoiding the deadly beam. A colossal figure loomed where the attack had originated. But Yongin was ready. He unleashed a powerful fire spell, engulfing the colossus in flames. The explosion rocked the chamber, momentarily distracting their enemies. Jongin seized the opportunity, shouting for the others to destroy the statues. Jim-chul, seeing the advancing figures, leaped forward, winding his fist for a powerful strike. His specially crafted gauntlet slammed into one of the stone figures with a thunderous blow. But to his shock, the statue didn't crumble. It was far sturdier than he had anticipated. Before he could react, an explosion sent him flying to the side. Jongin, relentless, continued his assault. He quickly realized their enemies had high resistance to physical attacks. His initial fiery explosion had no effect. The flames merely washed over the statue without leaving a mark. It became clear that these creatures might also possess strong resistance to spells. Son Ki-hoon, one of the hunters, struggled to find a way to attract the statue's attention. Meanwhile, Cha-Hyen's psychokinetic spells had no impact. The statues remained completely unmoved by her efforts. Jongin quickly assessed the situation, realizing they might be running out of options. His gaze narrowed, searching for Sung Jinwoo. Here's a refined version of your passage with improved flow, pacing, and clarity. Jongin knew that waking Jinwoo was the key to turning the tide of battle. Whatever force had kept him unconscious needed to be broken, and there was no time for hesitation. Taking a risk, Jongin hurled a fireball through the air, aiming not to harm Jinwoo, but to jolt him awake. Just before the flames could reach him, the architect intervened, stepping between Jinwoo and the attack. The fireball exploded harmlessly against the architect's torso, leaving no visible damage. But for the first time, emotion flickered across its face. Rage. Lips curling back, the architect bared its teeth, furious that the hunters had dared to disturb the king's slumber. With his sword raised high, the architect advanced on Jongin, prepared to strike him down. But before the attack could land, 3 hunters surged forward, intercepting the blow with sheer force. The impact sent shockwaves rippling across the battlefield, but they held their ground, refusing to falter. One of them called out to Cha-Hyen, urging her to reach Jinwoo. Understanding the urgency, Hyen sprinted toward Jinwoo's motionless form. But the architect moved swiftly, blocking her path with an amused smirk. "Impressive," it taunted. "Show me if you can push beyond your limits." Gritting her teeth, Hyen unleashed her signature skill, sword dance. Her blade became a blur, slicing through the air in a relentless flurry of strikes. Yet the architect deflected every blow effortlessly, its laughter echoing through the chamber. Then, in a single calculated move, it slashed at her, cutting deep into her arm. Blood dripped to the ground as she staggered, dropping to one knee. The architect sneered. "Predictable," it mused. "The system accounts for every possibility. No matter what you do, the outcome remains the same. Futile. Boring." Jong-in clenched his fists. "We have to wake Jinwoo. Now!" he shouted. Ignoring the pain in her wounded arm, Hyen lunged forward again, desperate to reach Jinwoo. The architect's smirk widened. It swung its sword in a devastating arc, the force of the strike shaking the entire battlefield and scattering debris. Yet Hyen dodged in the last instant, pushing forward with unwavering resolve. Then the architect froze. A shadow flickered beneath Hyen, something lurking within her own darkness. Though it couldn't fully manifest within the dungeon's constraints, its presence was undeniable. The architect narrowed its eyes. "Impossible. How did a shadow find its way inside you?" Hyen, breathing heavily, met its gaze. "Because I'm Jinwoo's friend," she declared, "and I came to bring him back." The architect let out a low, amused chuckle. "How touching. Very well then. Witness his return, but at a cost. Before the monarch awakens, every last one of your companions will die." Before it could strike, a voice rang out, cutting through the battlefield like a blade. "Not today." Bam! A fist crashed into the architect's face with earth-shattering force. The massive figure was sent hurtling across the chamber, slamming into a distant wall with a deafening explosion of shattered stone. Dust and debris rained down as silence gripped the battlefield. Jinwoo stood at the center of it all, his eyes burning with an intensity none had seen before. His voice, filled with fury and confusion, shattered the quiet. "What have you done to my body?" Sung Jinwoo had awakened. "Here's a refined version of your passage with improved clarity, pacing, and impact." Jimchul and Cha Hyen stood frozen in shock, unable to process what they were witnessing. Jong-in, on the other hand, let out a breath of relief, silently watching as the scene unfolded. Jinwoo strode toward the fallen architect, his expression unreadable. Without hesitation, he planted his foot firmly on its face, pressing down with an unyielding force. The architect howled, a mix of pain and disbelief contorting its features. What are you?" it demanded, its voice laced with confusion. It couldn't comprehend how Jinwoo stood before it instead of the king. How had he broken free from the Black Heart's influence? How had he even regained consciousness? Jinwoo's eyes narrowed at the mention of the Black Heart. His mind raced, piecing together the truth behind his extraordinary mana. The overwhelming power surging through him, beyond anything he had ever wielded, all traced back to that heart. Suddenly, a system notification flashed before his eyes. It reminded him of his past battle against Baran, the king of demons. The immense power of his defeated foe had recognized him as its new master. Mana, 100,000. Title, The Demon Hunter. Jinwoo studied the architect, sharp instincts revealing two undeniable truths. First, the Black Heart had no connection to the architect. Second, it certainly hadn't been created for Jinwoo's benefit. Even with the knowledge he had gathered, there were still missing pieces, secrets deliberately kept from him. His thoughts darkened as he pressed down harder, forcing the architect to speak. "You once opposed my selection as the player," Jinwoo stated coldly. "Why? What was your real plan?" The architect sneered despite its predicament, its voice dripping with malice. "You think your actions will go unnoticed? The monarchs will never allow this," it warned. Jinwoo's patience wore thin. In a single motion, he summoned every dagger from his inventory. The air crackled with energy as the blades hovered menacingly, pulsing with mana. His foot remained firmly on the architect, his gaze sharp and unforgiving. "Talk," he commanded. Yet even in its dire state, the architect chuckled darkly. "You still don't see it, do you?" It hinted at something greater, something beyond Jinwoo's understanding. Before more could be revealed, chaos erupted. Screams echoed through the lair as the other hunters reacted in terror. Jinwoo turned, his senses sharp. Something was wrong. The colossal statues that had once remained still, retreating into the shadows, had begun to move again. Their eyes glowed a menacing red as they advanced, their massive bodies radiating an ominous aura. The architect let out a low, satisfied chuckle. "You can kill me, but my puppets will continue to hunt you," it taunted. Jinwoo, however, didn't waver. He merely smiled. He saw through the architect's game. He wasn't just going to defeat it, he would destroy every last one of its creations afterward. For the first time, the architect faltered. It scrambled to respond, realizing too late that the true threat wasn't the monarchs. It was Sung Jinwoo. But Jinwoo was already ahead. He saw through the architect's bluff with chilling precision. Even if the architect perished, the system itself wouldn't collapse. The lies, the gaps in its words, Jinwoo had caught them all. The architect had underestimated him, forgetting why it had chosen him in the first place. Jinwoo had a talent for breaking the rules. Suddenly, the system pinged, again and again, but it was failing. Jinwoo had forced the architect into a corner, and the repeated notifications confirmed its desperation. Access denied. Access denied. Access denied. The architect froze. Its attempts to manipulate the system were being outright rejected. Jinwoo remained unwavering, his thoughts cold and calculated. He had come to a realization. The system and he were intertwined, bound in a way that couldn't be easily severed. If the system had made him into someone's avatar, then he would use it in ways they had never anticipated. His gaze darkened with finality. He would devour the system itself. The moment he made his decision, his blade struck. Steel tore through the architect's body, and with it, the system's illusion of invincibility shattered. Shards of flesh and metal exploded outward, red and green energy lashing through every last defense. The architect convulsed, its form breaking apart under the force of Jinwoo's relentless assault. It staggered, its face split in two, barely clinging to the last moments of its existence. And with its dying breath, it whispered a final prophecy. "When the pillars of fire that hold the heavens are raised, an inevitable death will come for you." Its voice faltered. Cracks ran along its body, deepening until it finally crumbled to nothing. Jinwoo exhaled, the cold gleam in his eyes never wavering. He smirked. "As you please." Outside the gate, tension ran high. The Bravery Guild stood impatiently, waiting. It had been an hour since the Hunters Guild entered the dungeon, and unease was settling in. They had assumed this was a routine C-rank dungeon. So what was taking so long? Then the first hunters emerged. Gasps rippled through the Bravery Guild as they took in the scene. Even the elites of the Hunters Guild looked battered, their faces pale with exhaustion. Whatever had happened inside was beyond anything they had expected. Jinwoo stepped forward, his expression grim. "Help us move the bodies." The Bravery Guild members stiffened. They had known the battle would be tough, but the sheer number of casualties was staggering. Quietly, they agreed, though the weight of what had transpired was only just sinking in. Jinwoo stepped through the gate, lost in thought. The system architect was gone, yet many of his questions remained unanswered. He stood in silence as Jinwoo approached, his gaze heavy with unspoken grief. 20 top-ranked hunters, Jinwoo said quietly. "That's how many we lost today." Jinwoo's jaw tightened. If this had been a dungeon break, the devastation outside would have been unimaginable. Jinwoo let out a weary sigh. I called for the Hunters Guild's help when I realized how intense the mana leaking from the gate was, but I never expected this. None of us did. Jinwoo listened without a word. He knew the losses had been immense, but he also knew he had done everything possible to prevent even greater casualties. Jimchul, still struggling to make sense of it all, glanced at Jinwoo. "How did you know? How did you find the double dungeon hidden in that gate?" Jinwoo's answer was simple. "The dungeon called to me." Jimchul frowned, trying to process the words. It didn't make sense. No one had ever experienced something like that. But looking at Jinwoo, at the aftermath of this impossible battle, he knew the younger hunter wasn't lying. Jinwoo remained an enigma, one Jimchul wasn't sure he would ever truly understand. Meanwhile, Cha Hyen approached Jinwoo, concern in her eyes. "You're hurt," she said softly. Jinwoo offered a small, reassuring smile. "I'm fine," he replied. "Just a little tired." But before he could say another word, exhaustion crashed over him like a wave. His vision blurred, his body gave out, and he collapsed. "Jinwoo!" Cries of alarm erupted around him. Hunters rushed to his side, calling his name, desperately trying to wake him.